We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin.
Welcome everyone back for part 3 of This is America, a 10-part series in which we discuss the political climate as it is today in America. Joined with us here, we have Michael Morris, who will be discussing these issues, and myself, Lloyd and Mike, will be calling in with questions. So today, our topic for discussion is unemployment. So my first question now is, how do you solve unemployment, in your opinion?
Well, it's actually fairly simple. You give people jobs. It's as easy as that. The government has the ability, if they would only do it, which they currently won't because there is such a large conservative element in Congress. If the government would only do it, they could literally just give people jobs. There is so much crumbling infrastructure in this country. You could just hire tons of people as construction workers, rebuild them. You could literally just hire people to dig holes and fill them up. As long as people are doing something, the government can pay them. That would give people jobs, therefore they have money, therefore they can take that money and go spend it, which causes businesses to see that there is demand again, therefore to be able to supply for that demand. They will hire more people. It'll take a while, but unemployment ultimately will be solved through such a simple process, really.
All right, so your proposed solution is for the government simply to create jobs. Now, that sounds good, but isn't the government ultimately weakening themselves if they're spending all the money to create these jobs, but only getting a portion back from it in taxes?
Well, it is rather cyclical when you think about it. But the issue here is private corporations, private businesses, have moved past the point where they have to be limited to being in a specific country. We are now under globalization. Businesses can move wherever they feel like. Therefore, even if we see that this demand increases, what's going to happen is many businesses will still move their workforce overseas to China, Mexico, Vietnam, other countries that pay their workers far less. That way, even though there's demand that they have to provide the supply for, they will still be able to make higher profits by paying those workers less. They don't have to pay them, health benefits. They have to pay them less than what the minimum wage is in the United States. So they have no motivation still to really hire American workers in the private sector. Therefore, it's part of the government's job, really, if they're going to provide for the general welfare of the United States. If the government of the people is going to provide for the people, then it is on them to be the employer when they need to be the employer. Hopefully, this is only a temporary situation. Hopefully you're able to move past that point where you need the government to be able to hire tons of people. That's what Keynesian economics is about anyway, that you use the government to inject its power into a situation like this so that they can hire a bunch of people temporarily until the economy is healed. But it's necessary, even if it does seem rather cyclical or self-reinforcing, that it is something that the government has the ability to do, and it would help bring down unemployment.
So what then is the ultimate root cause of unemployment?
Well, if you're speaking in the immediate sense, it's something that I sort of hinted at, which is that businesses do not see the demand out there for them to provide the supply. You could argue this is sort of an excuse by them, that in reality they're always looking for reasons to cut workers because workers in America can be expensive. And so when the economy hit a downturn, they found ways to cut out people so they could continue holding up their profit margins. That is true. It is also true, though, that because of the economic downturn, there is simply less demand because people sort of hoard their money, put it in the bank, don't go out and spend it. If people don't go out and spend money, businesses don't think that there's going to be a reason to provide more supply, therefore they hire less workers. But as I also said, because of globalization, they can go out and hire people in other countries. But the real ultimate reason, if you're really going to get down to it, is something that's pretty controversial in America, but is basically true, which is that people can be unemployed because they don't own their own means of production, okay? An individual worker does not own the factory or collectively own the factory. He doesn't own the tools used to produce things. It is one individual, the one rich person or the small group of people who own that business, and therefore they can treat their workers as capital that they can do whatever they want with, basically. This is all protected because of Western ideas about contract theories. But even though it sounds like a good idea, in theory, you have one worker and one owner, and they sign a contract where they say, I'll work for you and you provide this for me. It sounds nice and all until you realize that it's really the owner who has all of the power in the relationship because the worker needs to have some sort of job. Therefore, when the owner feels like cutting him off so he can make more profit for himself or make more profit for the business rather than trying to find profit in other avenues like cutting his own salary, then the worker becomes dispossessed and the worker has to go try to find a job elsewhere. All he has left to sell now is his labor. He doesn't have something to actually own. If, say, a cameraman owned his own camera, he can always go around and find something that he can film and sell the use of his camera to another person for. He owns that production. If some other company owned that camera, though, he might have to lease it, in which case he's dependent on that other group's power. So the ultimate reason for unemployment is going to be because the people do not control their own economic situation. Economics in this country is not democratic. It is, if anything, it's rather tyrannical.
All right, so let me get this straight. Your first proposed solution for solving unemployment was for the government simply to provide jobs, to take over the job-providing enterprise from the businesses. But also, the root cause of unemployment seems to be an ideological one, such that people don't own their means of production. So, the government simply providing jobs, doesn't that sound like more of a band-aid remedy as opposed to getting at a real cure for this issue of unemployment?
It is, in the sense that if your goal is ultimately the government trying to supply temporary jobs until the private sector can come back and fill in those jobs, if the private sector can expand in like a free market system, then yes, it's pretty much a band-aid that doesn't address the root cause. The issue is that it is really an ideological difference. It's the difference between capitalist ideas about economics and socialist ideas about economics, which because of America's historical tendency towards leaning rightwards, even among centrists are sort of brought up to be capitalists without thinking about it. Nobody teaches you any left-leaning economics in school. You just learn basic capitalist economics, and it's tied into American ethics. So ultimately, until people can really think about what the driving forces, the underlying forces in the American economy and political system are, then you're just going to see this continual problem where the people who control production, the people who control businesses in America are able to treat workers as if they are just something that can be manipulated for the purpose of profit. And you will continue to see these recessions come and go with increasing ferocity and size as they continue to get away with it. I just want to clarify one thing, though, which is that, because I know somebody in the comments is going to go accuse me of being a Soviet or something like that, which is that I am not saying that the government needs to permanently be the provider of jobs, because while theoretically a republic or a democratic government is representative of the people and therefore the people control the means of production through their government, in reality what it really ends up being is a bureaucracy controls the means of production. It's necessary in the short term, maybe longer than short term, but still ultimately short term, for the government to step in when private industry is the dominant force in providing labor, so that people can be assured of having a job. But the ultimate solution to ending unemployment is going to be if people themselves control their own economic forces. People control their own means of production. You don't need the government to run a factory for you any more than you need a private individual to run a factory for you. You can have the people working at the factory collectively run it themselves. They can have their own little democracy in it, elect their own leaders. There's no reason either side needs to be the one that steps in and runs the thing. The way that people will be able to maintain their jobs and maintain or keep unemployment from happening at such high levels again is if they are looking out for themselves through a democratic process in the workplace, just as they do in politics.
Now that is a great solution. All right, everyone, that concludes today's episode of This is America, our discussion on unemployment. Please join us next week for part 4, in which we'll be discussing minorities in poverty.